Climbing has been the center of my life for almost 50 years. My wife, Joyce, says I'm obsessed, but it's who I am and what I do. I guess I missed life's lecture on everything in moderation. Mountains have a way of giving back much more than they take away, so I feel emotionally rich having spent so much time in them. Early on, I wanted to be like Maurice Herzog. What he wrote in Annapurna found a fertile seedbed in my young mind. His book sent me down this journey of discovery. Ironically, 23 years after the French success on Annapurna, I reached the summit of Dhaulagiri, and like Herzog, was carried out on the backs of porters because of frostbite to my feet. I guess I came too close to being like Herzog. I enjoyed climbing my first few years, but probably wouldn't have been so passionate if it weren't for my first partner, Chris Kopczynski. Every young climber needs a buddy like Kopczynski to make the sport fun. We perceived ourselves as the American equivalent of the French duo Lionel Terray and Louis Lachenal. In a tough spot, we'd always ask each other, what would Terray do? We made it up a lot of good climbs that way. Chris and I are still best friends, and that's the best gift climbing has given me. I think I'm alive today because I learned very early not to tempt death in his backyard. I was 18, 400 feet off the ground and free climbing a rock flake as greasy as a strip of bacon. Chris had me on belay, but I was 100 feet above him with only one rusty ring angle piton near the belay to catch a fall, which I realized was coming. As my grip failed, I slowly slid down the knife-edge flake I was climbing and prepared to plunge into space. The fabric in the crotch of my knickers caught on a tiny rock horn and held me long enough for me to pound in another piton, sling it, and jump on it. It held. I never wanted to be that scared again. So safety has been my main priority over the years. Joyce has been my rock for 43 years. She was our family's breadwinner and raised our 3 kids as I spent time in the Himalayas. We met on a warm spring morning in 1971 during the Spokane Mountaineers Basic Climbing School, of which I was in charge. I noticed this pretty young student having difficulty climbing a minor boulder problem, so I gave her a good push from below. We were married 9 months later. That taught me a good lesson: keep my hands to myself. If I was to pick my favorite climb, it would be the west pillar of Makalu. It's a classic route and so French in its elegance and position. There were only 4 of us in 1980, determined to do the climb without bottled oxygen or Sherpas above base camp. I've been on bigger teams with better-known climbers, but when it came to working as a single unit, our team could have climbed any route on any peak that spring. We were that compatible. It was just chance that only I reached the summit. I'm glad I climbed in the era of Messner. He had a vision that raised the bar for all of us climbing in the Himalayas during those years. Messner broke the old British Raj expedition mold and set us free to climb without oxygen, without Sherpa support, and without the legions of climbers and tons of equipment that moved mountains rather than climbed them. His inspiration is why our American expedition made the 3rd ascent of K2 without oxygen in 1978. I first saw the route on Ulibiaho from the summit of Trango Tower in 1977. It was a classic big wall line, but at an altitude up to 20,000 feet. Two years later, I was back. With me were three of America's best rock climbers, Kim Schmitz, Ron Kauk, and Bill Forrest. Once safely up the 2,500-foot ice couloir, a virtual bowling alley of rock fall, and onto the 3,500-foot rock wall, Yosemite Big Wall experience paid off. Despite a lingering Karakoram snowstorm, Forrest's close call with cerebral edema, and a 50-pound ice block that wanted to break Kauk's shoulder, 7 days later, we stood on the summit. Half the journey was over. Success was still 6,000 feet below. I think of Tawachi as one of my best climbs, but one that I wouldn't want to repeat. My first attempt was in the spring of 1984. Jim Bridwell, Naoe Sakashita, and I reached the bottom of the northeast wall in mid-April and watched and listened as continuous rockfall shattered the morning silence. It would have been suicide to attempt the climb, so we left. I returned 5 years later with Jeff Lowe, this time in winter. This was the key. It was terribly cold, but most of the rock stayed put. There was a point of no return on that face, which we passed on the fourth day. It's not a good feeling, knowing the only way out is up and into the unknown. I still can't believe we got up the north face of Nanda Devi. Nothing seemed to go right from day one. The expedition members never worked together as a team. We were climbing during the monsoon, the worst possible time for storms and avalanches in the Himalayas, and the route was far too technical for many of the climbers. In the end, a few of us kept pushing and succeeded, but it certainly wasn't worth Devi's life and the memories we've had to live with since. When I think back on all these years of climbing, I don't think of routes and summits. I think of my partners, Jeff and Lou, Rick and Jim, Kim and Galen, Nanda Devi and Willie, and all the others who shared their time with me, freezing on belays, bent under heavy loads, fighting hurricane winds, and drenched in monsoon rains. We shared a passion, overcame the difficulties, and whether the summit was reached or not, we were better for our efforts. I don't think I continued year after year to climb in the Himalayas and Karakoram just to summit peaks. For me, expeditions to Asia were opportunities to step back through time, experience ancient religions and cultures, and make sense of my life back home. The journey to the mountain became more important to me than the climb.